and welcome to Somewhere on the Spectrum. Today we are doing a book review. Yes, books. I like books. I like books very, very, very much. For me, I think it's probably one of the better ways that I can learn things. When I started researching about autism, that was sort of the first place that I went. Books. What can I read? So I studied psychology at university back in the early 2000s. And I did do a module about autism. It wasn't awfully helpful. I finished my university degree in 2002. It's not that long ago. 24 years sounds like a long time, but in fact, it's not that long ago. You know, these days it's so common to think of things as being around forever. And autism definitely has been around forever. The evidence now is that every culture, every community around the world has it. The difference is in how we've sort of pathologized it in the West. I would argue predominantly because it doesn't fit into our Western capitalist system. That's the story for another day. And so by 2002, the research was predominantly being done on young, predominantly white boys. And there was still very much the argument about whether the vaccination was causing autism. I hope you all know that's not true. So that has been debunked in a massive way. But at the time, that was still very much going on. But the reality of what autism is as a lived experience was not part of any of the things that I studied. It was very much autism from the outside, not from the inside. So when it came to me, myself, wanting to research it, I wasn't fully convinced that the best place to go to was the scientific community. Let's put it that way. So I turned instead to other autistic people. What could they tell me? There's a lot of books that I read, and we will get to them eventually, but the one that I think is a great place to start is Spectrum Women. This book was written by a collective of 17 women. Mine was published in 2018 by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. I'll put all of this information in the description. And it's called Spectrum Women, Walking to the Beat of Autism. Now, before you gentlemen whiz away thinking, oh, that's not for me, I want to talk very quickly about the question of male-female autism. I personally feel that we are too early in the journey of autism to say absolutely if there is a male and a female way that autism presents. And I'm sure many of you will be very angry with me for saying that. But there's a logic to my madness. So we have historically said that male presenting autism is like all those young white boys. Slight aside, I can't help it. Sorry, ADHD. There's a few issues with those early things. We're really not kidding when people say that all of those early studies were done about young white boys. We're not kidding. They really were predominantly done about young white boys. That's both for ADHD and for autism. I think it's worth thinking about why that might be. I think there is absolutely a thing about racism there, and I think there's a side that we don't think about very often. Of course, young white boys, the ones everybody wants to help. There is absolutely a part of that these were the predominant people that should be helped. And a lot of other people that might have been struggling in class, I think there's a play on racism that's happening here, and it's affecting both sides. I think on the one side, people who weren't white boys, there were lower expectations for them. And so if they didn't behave themselves well in class, that was because they were a black boy or a black girl or a brown boy or a brown girl. The varieties are endless. And that was the reason. If they messed around in class, it was because of the color of their skin they were bad. That was the direct logical reason, because of all of the societal programming that we have and so many teachers have. And if you don't think teachers do, please go and read Akala's book. I'll put that in the description too. And that will explain to you that teachers, certainly in the UK, are definitely, some of them, racist. Anyway, so there's one side of it that I think we can say that children of other colors were being ignored, girls often because they weren't as disruptive, and boys because They were just expected to be annoying, expected to be disruptive, expected to be badly behaved. So that was just them being themselves. And on the flip side of that, I think it's also important to recognize that the pressure then is put on the young white boy that he is expected to be the one who can sit still in class, who's not going to get distracted, who's going to be able to achieve the educational heights. And because he doesn't, there's something wrong with him, because as a young white boy, he should be able to achieve society's expectations. Then he gets the privilege, because he can't, he is privileged in that people think that there's something wrong with that and that should be studied, because clearly there shouldn't be anything wrong with young white boys. So I do think that there is a reason, a central logical reason why those were particularly the people who are being studied more than anybody else. Now, hopefully, we've got a lot more broad and diverse studies going on. Now let's come back to the male-female autism in inverted commas. So the male version of autism that we see in those early studies was all about that not socializing, lining up trains, very stereotypical Rain Man representation of autism. And that has continued to be sort of a trope throughout the diagnosis process, that this is what male autism looks like. This is what, for a long time, autism looks like. And certainly, there are many men who could fit that stereotypical representation outwardly of autism. And on the other side, then, slowly growing, we've got this female representation of autism, which is much more focused on masking very often because of the social construct that we are brought up into. And so our autism looks different, is often very much internalized, hidden from the world, and later diagnosed for sure. I would say, having met quite a lot, not millions, but quite a lot of autistic people, I would say even just from the people that I've met so far who've predominantly been diagnosed, late diagnosed, but diagnosed autistic, that this male-female concept is mostly bullshit. I have met many men who have been surviving onto this point because they are highly socialized, working very, very hard in the organizations that they work with and masking a lot. And similarly, I have met women, and I think Temple Grandin is our main representation for that group of women who have traditionally fit into the male version of autism. I think what I would say is we're very, very early in what autism is. And I think we're going to find that it's heavily connected to ADHD, although not exactly the same in a lot of ways, but certainly a lot of cross traits. And I think we're going to find that brains are altogether a lot more diverse than we have historically believed. And I would also argue that we're going to discover that neurotypical people are not quite as neurotypical as we would like, because I would argue that there's some of them who are on a very extreme end of the socialization, in that they will do anything to fit in. And I think that too is a spectrum that I think there is also pathologizing that maybe should be going on over there, but that's a different story. This is essentially to say, yes, it is called spectrum women, but if you're a dude and you mask, there's nothing wrong with reading this book. Because actually, there's a lot of stuff that is going to be just as relevant to you. Yes, these are women's stories written by women. It's no bad thing to read more from women. They're voices that aren't usually heard, but I think you'll find yourself represented in this book as well. Gosh, that was a long way round. Anyway, so this book has 20 chapters covering all aspects of life with autism, from intersectionality and diversity to socializing and anxiety, from growing up to parenting, from sensory awareness to emotional regulation and executive dysfunction. So it really covers a broad amount of autism. Each chapter is an essay written by 1 to 3 women, some focusing on their own experiences, others on their particular professional specialism. So there are some members of this writing team who are doctors and psychologists who express their opinions too. If you are newly diagnosed or self-diagnosed, then I think this is a really, really good place to start your research, because it gives a good basic across the board idea of traits, vocabulary, which I think is a big learning curve in the world of autism, and how autism feels from the inside, as well as lots of good strategies and tips and kind of positive stories that you can read as well. So I want to go ahead and read from this book a few little excerpts just to give you an idea of kind of what you're letting yourself in for. So this is from chapter 3, Identity, which is written by Artemisa. Little girls on the spectrum don't know they're on the spectrum. True. They just sense that they are different somehow. While certain things may come to us very easily, one thing surely will not. And that is feeling as if we are made of the same materials as other children and adults around us. Feeling native to our supposed species. That is, feeling normal. It seems to us that everyone has been given some sort of script, or at least some crucial plot elements, while we have been given blank notebooks, a few obsessions, and a bunch of seemingly arbitrary rules. Rules are perhaps the first safety ropes we have to hang onto in this topsy-turvy world. Don't cross at a green light, wash your hands before dinner, never tell a lie, etc. We can follow those things, then, of course, we discover that people lie all the time and break so many rules we feel as if we've been hanging onto a rope attached to nothing. This is one of many betrayals that we will feel deeply starting as young humans, that will make us suspicious and skeptical, while at the same time perpetually susceptible. Agree with all of that. This is chapter 11, Our Sensory World, and this chapter is written by 3 people, Kate Ross, Jen Ellickson, and Barb Cook, who is a key person. She's an editor of the book. And this particular piece is written by Kate Ross about sensory seeking, avoiding, and feedback. When I discovered I was Aspie at the age of 30, it put my sensory issues into a context that finally made sense. Previously, others gave me the impression that I was being dramatic, when in actuality, I was experiencing sensory overload. Conversely, if I stopped when I saw something particularly shiny or colourful that others would otherwise walk past, then I was viewed as a bit weird. Autistic people can crave and seek sensory input as much as we will reject and avoid it, either outright or by diverting to a different stimulus we can better tolerate. We can exhibit hyper and hypo sensitivity to various stimuli, sometimes going between the two over the same stimulus depending on the situation. For example, some can be hypersensitive to temperature and touch, significantly reacting to being too hot or cold or to any physical contact, while others can be hyposensitive, sometimes demonstrated by wearing clothing inappropriate to the weather, for example, shorts and t-shirt when it's snowing outside, or being unaware of bumping into furniture. Becoming overloaded by sensory input and being unable to process it all can lead to emotional distress and meltdowns. So regulating one's sensory system is essential. A challenge if you have interoception issues. So, fun. I could talk about all of these. I could give you feedback on all of these. What I will say is, at some point in the future, we're going to cover all of this stuff. What I want you to do with this is just listen to what you're hearing, consider purchasing the book, and really think about, how does this affect you? Is this something that you deal with? How does it affect you? And realize that you're definitely not on your own. This is chapter 14, Executive Functioning, with Terry Main, Maura Campbell, and Kate Ross. And I'm going to read from a piece by Terry Main. I wasn't just different socially. When it came to lessons, my brain continued to be obstinate and refused to conform. When given tasks by the teacher, my brain protested, often not understanding the tasks it was being asked to do. It felt pretty rough as all the other kids quickly got on and understood straight away. It was as if they had been given an extra instruction that someone had forgotten to give me. I often found that I understood the concept of what was being asked, but what the first step should be and how to make my mind or body actually take it was overwhelming and just blew my mind. Deep down, I knew I was bright, but I felt so damn stupid watching everyone else just get it while I floundered or froze. I'd keep trying to process to the point of collapse, and when the teacher eventually came round to check in, I would be distressed, have produced no work, and was unable to explain why. My brain would be finished for the day, just exhausted. Not that I knew it at the time, but this is an example of what a young autistic girl's executive function challenges look like. The teachers are puzzled by it. They know this girl is intelligent, and yet she appears to be unable to manage the simplest task and does things in a way they don't understand. There are tears and behavioral outbursts she doesn't fit in socially, and it's difficult for her teachers to know what to make of her. Executive functioning is generally seen as a group of abilities that allow you to manage your thoughts, emotions, and actions in order to get things done. It is responsible for skills such as organizing and planning, initiating and managing tasks, paying attention, regulating emotions, and self-monitoring. That is, keeping track of what you're doing and modifying your behavior accordingly. As you grow up, the more skills you need, the more complex the emotions become, and before you know it, you're expected to behave like a responsible adult. Things get tough. As more is demanded of your executive functioning ability, the number of challenges and risks of total shutdown increase at an exponential rate. Yeah, sucks. I hope these snippets have helped you determine whether this book will be helpful or not to you. I would quickly like to read one of the promotional quotes in the beginning of the book from an American graduate student, Nicole Connolly. So Nicole says, "Spectrum Women is a powerful resource to own. This book offers the previously unknown and untold experiences of a vast demographic of autistic women, allowing other individuals on the spectrum, their parents, educators, and anyone involved in wanting to learn more by understanding and sharing their unique perspectives and challenges. But most of all, this book allows people to realize that a diagnosis doesn't have to be and shouldn't be seen as doom and gloom. Allow these women to transport you into their minds and their hearts to gain a new perspective of knowledge." I think this book is really, really relevant. As I mentioned before, even though it's called Spectrum Women, which I think was a good and necessary decision, I do think it's still relevant to a lot of men. I think we need to recognize that men, yes, they get an awful lot of attention. They really do. And I'm not trying to undermine the female experience, because we definitely need a lot more attention placed on women and girls. But I also think that there are quite a few men who are slipping through the cracks because they don't look like a traditional autistic male, but their symptoms fit more into the female model. I would quite like it if we could just get rid of the male-female stuff. Isn't it clear in the world that we're more diverse than two genders? Anyway, that's another topic for another day. Got a little bit political today. Hopefully that's okay. On this channel, I will do many more book reviews for you. Please let me know if you have any recommendations of your own in the comments. I always want to know about more autistic books. Always. Books written by autistics, for autistics, about autism, or not about autism. I don't care. Let me know. Please like and subscribe if you found this video useful at all. And I will see you again next week. Bye.